The Ukrainian Defense Forces destroyed an enemy ammunition depot in the area of the Kinburn Spit. The operation was carried out by naval forces together with a unit of the Security Service of Ukraine, according to the Ukrainian Navy and armed forces. The video was shown on Telegram. The Kinburn Spit is a strategically important area in southern Ukraine. It controls the sea approaches to the port, Mykolaiv, and key logistical routes. The destruction of the depot is another step toward weakening their combat capabilities in the south. We are now joined live by Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the naval forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. Mr. Dmytro, welcome. Tell us a few words about how such targets are identified for our military to strike and how long it takes to prepare such operations. Although it's clear that time is not on our side, and it's probably not a matter of months or even weeks to prepare for the destruction of an ammunition depot.
Greetings, Ms. Titiana. Greetings to the studio and the Techno-Dachev team. In fact, Kinburn, as you have already mentioned, is an important point both strategically and tactically. And yes, precisely because Russian occupiers are there, even without mentioning that there used to be a nature reserve and what they have done to it, they are able to control with their firepower the exit to the Black Sea from the ports, Mykolaiv region and Kherson region. That's right. Moreover, from this strategically important area, they periodically launch devastating strikes on the southern coastal regions of the Mykolaiv region, causing significant damage. This mostly affects the Kosorubska community and Ochakiv. But at the same time, we are also constantly working on their positions, where they are based, and from where they launch these attacks. And from time to time, they end up in the sights of our reconnaissance drones and other means of destruction. So yes, I have to respectfully disagree with you a bit here. Time is actually working quite significantly against them because the longer they continue to stay there, the fewer safe places like this very specific garage we clearly see in the video will remain for them to effectively hide. The Kinburn Spit, in general, was never densely populated anyway, due to its status as a nature reserve. And accordingly, the occupiers have fewer and fewer hiding places left, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for them to operate.
Vitaly Kim recently gave an interview to our colleagues, and he said, "First of all, let me remind you that the Kinburn Spit is in the Mykolaiv region. Due to the threat of being struck by the armed forces of Ukraine, they are not deploying troops there, and only certain reconnaissance units and FPV drone pilots are operating in the area." How do they operate? What exactly does their work involve? For example, being stationed there on the Spit and working as scouts. As for the drone pilots, to what extent and in which directions are they launching drones from the Kinburn Spit? And again, if an ammunition depot is being hit, how safe is it for those scouts and drone pilots, including FPV drone operators, to be stationed there?
It's dangerous, of course, but we're doing everything we can about it, and we're doing it successfully. And there were times when there was even a kind of relative calm after another sweep on Kinburn. But the Russians are running into problems trying to build any kind of defensive line there because the coastline is on both sides. And accordingly, they understand perfectly well that it's quite difficult to gain a foothold there since there are no real settlements as such. So yes, their main line of defense is already located elsewhere, closer to the mainland, which is actually already the Kherson region, and they use Kinburn specifically to move in there to deliver fire and conduct reconnaissance. At the same time, they are well aware of the danger if our troops appear there. And for them, of course, the absolute priority remains to prevent a successful landing. That's precisely why, for them, it's very much like a cumbersome suitcase without a proper handle. There are no adequate or well-maintained roads or reliable connections there, so you still have to physically get there, and basically you have to travel across challenging terrain that completely lacks any established road infrastructure whatsoever. And at the same time, they have to keep watch there to make sure we don't establish a foothold or land from our side. That's why it's quite difficult for them to hold this area, and as a result, they're taking losses there.
But again, at the end of July, that is right now, Vitaly Kim gave an interview just recently. And at the end of July, the spokesperson for the Defense Forces of Southern Ukraine, Volodymyr Voloshin, noted that on the Kinburn Spit, the Russian Federation is reinforcing its groups, and at that time it was mentioned that they were trying to strengthen their artillery positions and had even installed anti-tank weapons. I'm trying to understand how, if it's all sand there and everything gets stuck, if the armed forces of Ukraine can reach those positions. So does this mean there were attempts and then they shifted to the mainland, closer to the Kherson region? But even these attempts, I mean, they were absurd. Did they think Ukraine would just watch as they tried to settle in and dig in that sand?
They're decomposing there now, but in a slightly different sense of the word. But yes, the tactics can actually change. The main thing remains that, of course, it's understood that holding the defense there is quite difficult. They mostly use it as a platform to launch strikes. So here, in principle, everything is actually quite logical. They tried, it didn't work. They drive in, carry out their tasks, and try to get back quickly.
Understood. In fact, war itself implies that either it will work or it will go unnoticed. The operational situation currently in the Black Sea, because in recent days you might have seen messages in public channels that another massive attack is expected, but in fact we've already gotten used to such reports and expect them either at the end of the week or at the beginning of the week. Please, what is the current situation in the Black Sea?
It remains fairly stable, yes. Of course, we are expecting various challenges and different dangers, but we are continuing with the planned clearing of the waters. Last week as well, you could see the work we've already done, more or less publicly, regarding the clearing of the waters. Patrolling also continues, as does the detection of surface and aerial installations. At the same time, the Russians remain without access to the sea, but their aviation is active and operating quite intensively. So here you could say everything is more or less stable and secure, but in any case, we, of course, soberly and carefully assess the potential risks that may come from our formidable enemy. For now, I won't go into specific details, but one way or another, we are diligently fulfilling all the essential tasks set before us, primarily ensuring the absolute safety of civilian shipping and the continuous operation of our vital corridor, as well as actively protecting our territorial waters and extensive coastline.
You say he soberly assesses the risks from the enemy, but it's interesting whether the enemy himself soberly assesses the risks that come to him from his own side. I mean, the Russians shot down their own plane over occupied Crimea while repelling an attack from Ukraine. Overall, we can say this is part of the attacks on Russian Federation military facilities on the temporarily occupied peninsula, which are repelling this barrage. They even shoot down their own plane, but that's definitely something to cheer about for us, right?
Well, you know the old Russian saying, a rather cynical but often observed proverb, beat your own people so that others are truly afraid. From time to time, it seems you unfortunately have to shoot down your very own aircraft, a harsh and regrettable reality. In fact, there are such peculiarities in their use, yes. And probably most of all, they can also turn off identification so that they can't be seen. And as a result, such incidents happen. Of course, for us, it's always good news, if only because we didn't have to spend our own valuable resources to destroy an expensive, high-value piece of Russian equipment, which, of course, could cause us harm. So yes, it's a positive.
All right, Dmytro, thank you for this information. Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Naval Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, was speaking about the situation on the Kinburn Spit.